tonight we're going to be going through just a City of Topeka budget presentation, kind of how the budget works, where the money comes from, where it goes, et cetera, and then give you opportunity for the audience to ask any questions that they would like to ask, anything that they'd like to know about the budget. But we'll do some staff introductions first. I'm Josh McInerney. I work for the finance department. The reason we do a budget, and some of the words that were already said, was we do it to plan. So obviously we have a finite amount of money coming in, and we have expenses going out in terms of the police, fire department. So we have to make sure we have enough money to provide all those services, because we can't run an unbalanced budget. That's just not good business practice, and that's by state law too. And then also it allows us to align our priorities. So if the city council has priorities that they want to see funded, that's how we align those resources based off feedback that we get from them. So that's high level. That's why we do a budget, besides the fact that it's legally required. So kind of like a budget timeline. So we start our budget process early in the year, end of the first quarter, to where departments submit their request to the budget department on things they want to do for the upcoming fiscal year. And then in June or July, that's when the budget is actually compiled, because we have more revenue information. So we get our property tax notice in June that lets us know what the possible valuation increases are for the next year. And then what we kind of do in late July is we actually present a proposed budget. Now, 99% of the time, the budget we start with in July is not the budget we end with in September. So the budget is a fluid process. We do these events, we get feedback from council, priorities change among staff, things come up, it's the real world, new priorities happen, shift. So it's a very fluid process until we actually have to submit it in late September. And there's opportunity at the council meetings for citizens to come give their input, council members to give their input, so it's a very fluid process. Next on your screen now, if there's a slide that's the most important, this is my personal opinion, but it'd be this slide. So this is the tax breakdown for a $150,000 property on where your taxes go, or where your taxes go into the entity they go to. So this line right here is the City of Topeka. So when you pay your property tax bill, you're going to pay about $2,600, but of that $2,600, only $637, or about 25%, is going to the City of Topeka. You do pay property taxes to other entities such as the county, the building we're in right now, the library, and whatever school district you're in. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is if you see your tax bill go up, it could be one of those other entities raised their mill levy. I'm not saying that they did or didn't, but that's a possibility. And also they captured the appreciation from year to year of a property tax valuation increase. And then one final note, just an example now, if we were to raise or lower the City of Topeka's mill levy by 1 mil, so if that goes up to 37.956, that's $17.25 a year that you pay more in property taxes if it went up by 1 mil.
And that would also bring in an additional $1.5 million in revenues, is that?
Yeah, for the city, yes, that would.
And then also too, ma'am, just wanted to point out that Metro Transit Authority, for the transportation services, they're on the third to last on there as far as their tax mill levy that they collect. And that's in addition to fees and things of that nature, but they're also a taxing entity that's on your tax bill. Okay.
And then just some high level numbers, and we'll get into the breakdown of this in a sec. But we have our general fund, which is 25 budget. We haven't proposed our 26 budget yet. Was about $127 million, and then our citywide budget was about $400 million. So the reason that jumps up is we have a multitude of funds, but mainly that's from the utilities funds, which are secured by not property taxes, by your utility rates. If you ever were curious on how to calculate this, this is the methodology. You have your appraised value, so the $150,000 times an assessment rate. Now, if anyone owns any commercial property in here, the commercial property is it 22 or 24%? I can't remember off the top of my head. 22%. And then you would do this formula, take your times your mill levy divided by 1,000. That's how the property tax bill is calculated. Or 25%, it's on the screen, sorry. This was kind of like I was referring to earlier. This is just a one slide graphic representation of if you had $1, the breakdown of how that dollar's broken out. So most of your property taxes that you pay on a property tax bill, if you live within the city limits, goes towards Shawnee County. If you're in 501, the next biggest portion goes to 501, and then City of Topeka is about a quarter of a dollar. So how does that relate in terms of the general fund? So what is our general fund? So general fund is our one of our largest funds, and that goes to pay the police department, the fire department, public works department, planning department, and then general government services such as HR, finance, city manager's office, legal, and some other items. But the main takeaway of that $127 million number we talked about, a majority of it, of your property taxes, goes towards those police and fire departments, since they're the largest departments within the general fund. So next, I want to get into major revenue sources that we have in the city. So for the general fund, ad valorem tax is another name for property tax, but we really have three main sources of revenue for the general fund, which is the sales tax. So if you go to the store and buy something, 1% of that goes towards our general fund. We talked about the property tax a little bit. Then we have our franchise fees, mainly paid by Cox Cable, Evergy, and Kansas Gas for operating in our right-of-way. So that's about 70% of our revenue right there. Now, we'd also do transfer in money from other funds, such as utility funds. And then we also have the motor vehicle taxes when you go to the county and pay for registration. Part of that comes to us. Licensing and permits, those are planning, building fees that we may charge to developers and some other items. And then those are the big items. Now, in 2025, you're probably wondering what this miscellaneous is the city had about $37 million in reserves, which was about 30% of our budget. Now, best practice is probably 20%, and our policy minimum is 15%. What we decided to do in 2025 is spend down some of those reserves that we had built up to get us through the year. So that's the main number of our miscellaneous, to where we spent down a good deal of reserves to get us through the 2025 operating year.
Question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
You skipped over a missed it. What is an ad valorem tax?
That's property taxes. That's just how it exported in our chart of accounts, so sorry about that. Now, this is our citywide revenue. So fees for service, that is mainly our utility revenue. But we just wanted to show, when we talk about revenue going into the city, it's just not into the general fund. We have other funds. So a good example of that too is our sales tax, where you pay, in addition to the 1% half cent or 1% sales tax that you pay, you do pay a half-cent sales tax that goes to fixing our existing streets in the form of the citywide half-cent sales tax, and then there's an additional half-cent sales tax that goes to the county-wide projects. Think of 12th Street right here. That was paid for a sales tax that doesn't go into our general fund, but it goes into another fund to do that type of work to that project. So that's just some of the examples of where some of our other money comes from. But main thing is utility rates, property taxes, and sales tax. And then what do we spend our money on, right? So we get all that money in, and where does it go? Large takeaways in the general fund, about 75% of our expenses are through personnel. So in any service organization, that's pretty typical, but that's the main expenses. Then you have your standard vehicle expenses, motor fuel, electric bills, et cetera. So those are the large expenses inside the general fund. Now, on a departmental level, about 72% of our general fund, so that $127 million we talked about, and we have to submit a balanced budget, 70% of that is going towards the police and the fire department. So general fund, like I said, is majority of police and the fire department. Then you have your public works, and then our miscellaneous non-departmental. Those are for expenses not related to any really department. In that, that's where our social service grants that we give out to the community are stored. We solicit services with Topeka Cemetery and Rochester Cemetery. That's where those expenses are stored. And then there's a few other things in there, but that's just anything that doesn't particularly relate to the department. That's still an expense within our general fund is stored. So, but main takeaway from this slide is that most of it, 70% is police and fire. And most of those expenses within police and fire is personnel. Now, if we had to break out citywide expenses for the 2025 budget, I said earlier about 75% of our general fund is PD and fire related. Now, if we look at the totality of the money that we spend, it's a little less than that, it's a lot less than that because of the utilities. So our total utilities budget among water, wastewater, and stormwater is about $110 million. So that's about a little over a quarter of what the city spends its money on. And then public safety, police and fire, total city budget in the aggregate is about 25%. So the main things, 50% of our money goes towards police, fire, utilities, and then public works. That number is so big because that's where our countywide half-cent sales tax spending authority is. Our citywide half-cent sales tax that fix existing streets is expended. So that's one thing to keep in mind, where a lot of our money is on utility work, public safety work, or street work.